Welcome back to Bread and Butter, everybody, where we're serving up the basics for Hearthstone improvement in episode 92. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host Tito. Tito, how are you doing today?
Yeah, Doc, I've been better, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But forget about that for now. We have a brand new guest. Let's introduce them.
Yeah, so we have the one, the only, Schmoopy. Schmoopy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Yeah, I think I'm the one and only, but who knows?
Now, I know I'm supposed to have. We don't have the sound effects. We're supposed to have the air horns. Why do you have air horns as opposed to everybody else?
I think Sheep got bored. I think exclusively I don't get it. I think it was like I don't know. We can talk about it a little bit later in the show when you talk about like how I got involved with Born to Be Wild and like why there's air horns. I can dovetail that in.
Heck yeah. So, Schmoopy, what have you been doing inside of Hearthstone?
Inside of Hearthstone right now, on my stream in particular, which is where I play most of my Hearthstone, we're working through, we just got a brand new Wild Snapshot from Tempo Storm. And so after spending the week kind of rouletting around the meta decks that were outlined there, on my Discord, I do these like sort of survivor competitions where I ask members of my Discord to reply to a thread and they get assigned a deck, or sometimes they provide a deck, or sometimes, they don't read what's happening because they're wild players, whatever. And so it's basically like 27 people all sort of vying for VIP or making me craft a golden legendary or something. They get assigned a deck. If the deck wins or loses X number of games, it's, we figure out what gets eliminated. We play until there's only one deck left. And it's just a way to just sort of break up doing my usual like viewer decks and stuff like that. So mostly I've been involved in playing like meta stuff, which is great because usually I'm playing like, I don't know, Egg Death Knight and trying to win with that on ladder. So it's been fun.
Nice. Tito, how about yourself?
I have been trying to, so I'm doing something different. The last few months, I've been really focused on improving on my rank on ladder, and I've done a really good job of that. I've gotten, I said we had 11 star a couple months ago, and last month we were like top 4,000 or whatever. So we've improved quite a bit, but I've been playing like a lot of the same decks. I've been playing a lot of Excavate Paladin, which is, I really like the deck. I played before that. Previously, I played a lot of Pure Paladin. I played a lot of Egg Hunter. Like I'll find the decks that click with me and I'll go with them. But when it comes to when I've gone through all this, I haven't wanted to ruin my rank. So I haven't wanted to learn new decks or try new things. And that's been kind of limiting myself for like conquest, and it's been limiting myself for whatever. So this week I said, you know what? The heck with it. We're going to learn Overheal Priest. And I'm not going to and what usually happens is I'll play like 5 or 6 games of something or 10 games or something. And I'll go like 3-10 or whatever it is. And I start to panic. Let's go back to Paladin and let's fix these things because, I just put all that work in to get here, whatever. But I'm kind of just saying, you know what, we're going to be better and start to play some of these more complicated decks because not saying there's not decisions to be made in like every deck, but there are some decks that, decisions are fairly benign, where with something like Overheal Priest is like you have a lot more planning, you have to have a lot more it's one of those high skill cap decks that we hear about on the Vicious Syndicate report, and people don't play them that often because they lose after playing a few games. They say this isn't for me, so I've really kind of stuck with it this time. I think I've got 50 games with it so far, and I'm right about 500.
That's a chunk.
So
nice.
So we're learning it, and I want to be better at doing that. So I just went on the Talking Hearthstone podcast. I talked about this too, where it's like I don't just have one Hearthstone goal. I have like 8 Hearthstone goals, and some of them conflict with each other. And learning new decks is conflicting with improving rank, but only short term. Long term, it helps. So that's kind of where I've been enjoying it. But Doc, how about yourself? What have you been up to in Hearthstone?
So I played a couple games of Big Spell Mage, and I unfortunately was right when we were going over the cards, and who would have thought that cost reduction in Hearthstone is just a gross and degenerate thing if you can make things cost 0. It's never happened before. It's never been a problem, I'm pretty sure. But I've also just been playing a lot of Battlegrounds. Battlegrounds is still so much fun for me. I'm almost at like 4,700, which I know isn't great, but like it's been it's been a slog once I hit 45 to getting up to like 4650 and just going back down. Basically, if demons are in the lobby, I try to see if I can force demons because they're just something that's really easy for me to learn how to build right now. Been trying to go like Murlocs and mechs and trying to do other stuff. Haven't really had success with elementals or dragons. I've only had, I think, 3 dragon lobbies the entire time since this new patch has been out. Frogs are going crazy. I'm sorry if anyone can hear that.
I'm glad they're contributing to the pod.
I mean, Hearthstone's... Yeah, me too. I was talking about Murlocs and they got excited. But yeah, Hearthstone's just a fun game. Big Spell Mage is gross. I'm excited to try Sidisi's Hunter that he's been playing recently. But to his advice, probably going to wait until something happens to Big Spell Mage so that deck can have a little bit more room to breathe. But yeah, Hearthstone...
You know, Big Spell Mage isn't the best deck out there right now, though, right? There are multiple decks that farm Big Spell Mage that are even stronger than Big Spell Mage. It may be right now like 20% of the meta, but it's an opportunity to improve.
Yep, no, I get that, and I wanted to play Big Spell Mage because it was gross. Could tell it was going to be gross because things costing 0 in Hearthstone's never been a problem. So. It seemed fun. So, Schmoopy, what have you been doing outside of Hearthstone?
Outside of Hearthstone, I've been throwing rocks at a hornet's nest.
Like literally?
Oh, yeah.
Heck yeah.
So I found a hornet's nest. It's about the size of a basketball, probably like 3-4 meters up from the ground. I don't know how much of your audience like does the metric or the freedom units. I teach physics, so like I mostly think in metric. And so it's kind of on the side of a tree and it's facing away from my house, but it's large and it's like in range. And so I'm standing probably, we'll say like 12, 13 feet away from it. And like every day I pick up a rock and I go by and I try to whack that sucker. And you know, and usually I miss, but every once in a while I tip her and the hornets come pouring out, but I'm far enough away that I just walk away calmly. Like nothing's happening. They don't come for me. And I've been doing this for about 2 weeks now. And yeah. Ways to say that you play Wild Hearthstone by describing something you do in real life. Yeah, I've been throwing rocks at a hornet's nest.
Do you want a pro tip about disturbing bees?
Yes.
If you do it early in the morning when it's cold.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They're significantly less active.
Yes, I knew this. And raining too, right?
Like when I was
rain.
Yeah. Sorry, it's just ADD brain.
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to cut into your bit. We can get back to that in a second.
No, please
when I was
do.
in high school, I took AP Environmental Science.
Ape's
And
cool.
in my town, we had a wildlife refuge that was like 10 minutes away from my school.
Uh-huh.
So we would drive to that wildlife refuge in this class almost every single day and do stuff on the refuge.
Uh-huh.
And so we would go to the wood duck boxes. One of the wood duck boxes had a giant beehive in it. And on the way back, one morning in like September or October in the Pacific Northwest, so it was really cold, one of my classmates took this giant branch that had fallen off a tree and just whacked it. And the bees barely, like getting hit really hard, barely even like climbed out of it. It was really cool.
Yeah, I mean,
when I was in the...
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay. As I was saying, when I was in the Scouts way back in like, you know, the 80s, we used to go canoeing in the cranberry bogs down in Cape Cod. And I just remember one time that I was in the front and we were kind of going through some heavy brush that was kind of blocking the trail. And I looked up and there were just bees everywhere. And I just stopped. And I was like, please just back out slowly, please. I got out of there unscathed, but it was kind of frightening. It was like, you know, you're kind of just plowing through this. You look up and it's just like we were in the middle of like multiple hives, and it was just
woof.
It was scary. But all I could think of was when you were talking about your story about throwing hornet's nests. Is I too like to live dangerously.
I'm honestly I'm waiting more for wintertime when they're basically inactive. I'll take a baseball bat to the sucker with like, you know, with snow gear on. Schmoopy and I will dance on it. It'll be cool. Yes, my name is Schmoopydady, and I am the father of a child whose nickname is Schmoopy. But that can happen a little bit later in the interview. More seriously, my week is kind of cool because aside from my normal job, which is going great, I get the opportunity to coach my son in like little league soccer. They just grew the program back in my it's funny because the district that we live in is a huge sports district, but for some reason, I guess the in-house soccer program atrophied and died. And so they're trying to bring it back. And so they made a big point of being like, hey, we really need volunteer coaches. I played very seriously for a long time. I said, all right, screw it, I'll do it. And so I hopped in, and my toughest player to coach on the team is my son. My son has ADHD. He takes medication, but that medication is way worn off by 4 o'clock by the time we're having practice. And he's larger than the other children, and he's stronger than the other children, and he has been playing against me his entire life. So he's constantly going in on tackles very professionally into the other children, but I have to sort of manage that and say like, no, that's obstruction. They don't have the ball. You can't hit them yet. And also sort of keep him focused on drills and stuff. But like, it's been kind of both like equal parts infuriating and cool, because like we'll have some special moments after practice where it's just us playing and I'm watching him get better, and that's really cool. And to have a hand in that, that's really cool. But at the same time, like, also it's just like, okay, now Schmoop, stop. Stop. No, you can't. Don't kick the ball as far as you can and then sprint after it. That's we're keeping the ball close on this. See how Lydia's doing. Can you? Oh, all right. So like that's been more of what's important about my week.
Heck yeah.
Doc, how about yourself? What is your world outside of Hearthstone been? Strap in, Snoopy.
It's been busy. Been visiting family, hung out with my fiance's mom and stuff yesterday. That was a really good time. It's been a couple weeks since we've actually gone and hung out. Last weekend, went and saw Beetlejuice with her dad, and Beetlejuice, so much fun. I really enjoyed it. It stayed very true to what Beetlejuice is. Didn't take itself too seriously. Perfect. Just went full in on what the first Beetlejuice movie was, and this one was just as funny in my opinion. It was just great to see that universe again. And then I've been playing a lot of Magic, like always. It's just a fun card game, and new horror theme set just came out, so that's been a lot of fun to experience. And then I've been playing a lot of Space Marines too, because the Warhammer universe is very, very fun. So much lore to if you're a lore nerd, Warhammer is one of the things you can just deep dive in and never crawl back out of, because there's a bajillion different Space Marine chapters, all with very detailed lore. And then there's all the other races and their factions that have detailed lore. It's just really cool. So it's just been doing a lot of fun stuff. I do want to brag about my brother really quick. So as listeners of the show know, my brother is a film student and has had some in industry work. He just found out recently that a TV show he's starting to work on has already been confirmed for 3 seasons. He got off the phone with his boss, and found out that my brother is going to be the assistant locations manager, which is the second highest position in his department. And he hasn't even graduated film school yet. So he's just getting a lot of big old W's on that on that board. So just very, very proud of my brother. And then brother-in-law, one of them, he ran his second marathon in a month and a half 2 weekends ago. So also very proud of him, because marathon running's crazy. He's just very crazy kid. Loves to hyper focus on stuff, and right now he's hyper focusing on marathons and running, and so it's just been fun seeing him get geared up for that. And that's my that's my life outside of Hearthstone. Tito, how about you?
So you froze there for a second, Doc. I'm like, did we just lose Doc? He just kind of.
Nah, you're good. You're good. My bad.
I did not run a marathon this week. In fact, I did the opposite. So my wife got COVID and she's been sequestered upstairs. So we've been doing, just kind of surviving outside of that. And I was going to take my kid to the Granite State Comic Con that was happening this weekend, just kind of spur of the moment, because we were supposed to have my grandson this weekend. We didn't. We were going to go out picking. We didn't have to. We weren't doing that. He had a soccer game, but it was raining. His leg hurt. So we were going to do that afterwards. But I had a little tickle in the back of my throat, so I'm like, I have to be the mature, responsible adult and validate that I am all set. And I took a COVID test, and that thing lit up like a Christmas tree. Took like 10 seconds to confirm that, yes, you have COVID. And I have never had it before. I had it before we knew it was COVID. Like, I got super sick in February of 2001, both me and my wife, and it knocked us on our butts for like 2 weeks. So 98% sure that we had COVID then before it was the actual thing. But yeah, it's been a little rough. I was gonna I was telling Schmoopy here, I was gonna message him, say, hey, can we reschedule this for Tuesday, or maybe just skip this week and start next week? And I didn't, and I wrote the show notes, and I went took a nap, and then at 5:00 I got up, and I was dead. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to survive this, but we're professionals, and we stick to the plan. And I've been drinking the adult Pedialyte, which has helped, and I feel much better now. I don't know if it's a false positive or whatnot, but during my fever state, I rewatched the movie The Black Hole. And that movie, that's one of those movies that has been on my, I need to rewatch this since like 1993. Like, it's always been like, I should rewatch that, because I haven't watched it since I was like a super young kid, and it was not worth my time. It was not a good movie. It was like it wasn't like I had a nostalgia for it. It wasn't like my, you know how you go and watch something, you're like, boy, that was much worse than I remember, and I kind of feel bad that I watched it now because I enjoyed it. I didn't have that. I was going into it kind of, blind. I just remember the couple of the robots, and that was it. But it was not a good movie. I 2 out of 10 don't recommend. But Doc, enough from me. Why don't we get to know our guests a little bit? What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So, Schmoopy, how'd you get started in gaming, and how'd you find Hearthstone?
I've been a nerd as far as gaming goes my entire life. I remember I got the N64 when it came out for Christmas, whatever year that was, and however old I was. I want to say like eight or so. And like, I'd have friends over, we'd play Smash and stuff like that. The same friends got me sort of into Magic the Gathering, but not in a real serious way. Apparently it was like during one of the most broken periods in the game, the expansions that were coming out, but like, I was just interested in like playing big creatures, and my buddy was doing stuff like, I'm going to play my mono black deck, and I'm going to sacrifice a bunch of stuff and you lose the game. And I'm like, all right, fine. I guess that's how that's going. He understands the catalog better than me. But I got into Hearthstone basically because of one of my students. I started a new job. At this point, I've been there for 6-7 years now, I guess. And I had hopped around at certain, teaching positions since then. I teach high school physics, and I don't teach like really brilliant physics. I teach like, if you need a 4th year of science, and you can take my class. There's no like super fancy test at the end. It's just like sort of an exposure to physics for non-traditional science students. And so, I don't exactly have the most motivated crew. So I'm walking around and I see this kid playing on his phone, and me being me, I don't immediately stop him. I just stand behind him and look over his shoulder and watch him play Hearthstone. So he's playing Hearthstone. And I'm like, oh, this is fairly engaging looking. And, I'm watching this happen, and his buddy's like, yo, he's watching you. And so the kid stops playing Hearthstone. He's like, oh, sorry, teach. And I'm like, what game was that? And, I get a little bit, tertiary details, and I'm like, oh, look kind of cool. I guess I could try that. And so I downloaded it on my phone, and my son was 6 months old at the time. I was in this very room when I first downloaded it, and Schmoopy was crawling around on the floor trying to learn how to figure it out, chasing a little jingly ball that used to be attached to like the little mat that he used to sit down and look up at. And so so I downloaded Hearthstone, and it was over. I've been sort of because it's a mobile game, it's been something I've been able to engage in, despite the fact that I've had we'll say, difficult son. It was a process figuring out that he had ADHD. It was a process. There's a lot of side effects that happen because of that. He never was a good sleeper. He would fight us on naps all the time. He's has anxiety as well, which hasn't helped, sort of as an underlying thing. So like, he's always had to sleep with us or around us or something. So it's that has been something that has been very like physically and mentally draining. And so, we love him very much, but it's been a challenge. And Hearthstone is something that I could play and had easy access to, and like just sort of slowly but surely, got more and more engaged in the game, especially as the pandemic came through.
Nice. Props to your student for accidentally introducing you to Hearthstone. That's awesome.
Yeah, he failed my.
Do you remember
he failed my class?
Oh, he failed.
Yeah, he failed my class. Yeah, I played his buddy in a friendly challenge once. I don't even remember that kid's gamer tag, but like I played him. When I did play him, I kind of was like, I'd kind of studied up, and I played like Quest Murloc Shaman and Quest. So he's like, oh snap! Look, he's got this quest, and like his buddy who I busted playing the game the first time is just like, I guess you lose, and I smoked the poor kid. It's the first and the last time I've ever played a student.
Heck yeah. So where'd you come up with your gamer tag?
Yeah, so I had a different gamer tag forever, referencing my favorite soccer player ever. And I decided to branch off from it based off of the nickname we had given my son. Now, my wife was pregnant with my son. We're driving back from my parents' place to our apartment. We'd been married, and she had a baby book that her sister had given her. And in this baby book was a name that she read once and immediately began like snorting. Like, you're next to your significant other and they find something funny, but they're trying to hide it. And it's like, immediately, like, no. You need to share this. What did you just read? And she's like, what do you think about Schmoopy? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, this is it. And that was immediately his name in utero until he was born. And a little bit afterwards too. It's just, he is Schmoopy. And so I decided when I picked up the game, I'm like, I'm probably not going to play this very long. I'm probably not going to be saddled with this forever. So why don't I just name myself Schmoopydady? Like I've never had an absurd nickname before. I might as well go big or go home with this sucker. And little did I know that it's been like a blessing and a curse. Like I can tell some streams, like the streamer does not want to call me daddy. They're doing anything in their path. They're like, oh, thanks for the follow, Shmoo. And like, or like, just like some people are just like, so like, I don't know about that. And some people remember it. And it's kind of been like, a blessing and a curse in its own way.
I am two things. One, I'm the same way with the username. Is I tried to, before I started casting, before I started streaming and making podcasts and stuff like that, I looked into changing my name because I'm named after an 80s wrestler. But any names I could find was not good. Like I couldn't find a good one that kind of fit me and all that. And everyone's already known me as Tito for like so many years. And people are always fun. Sometimes when people meet me, like, oh, you're not an actual Tito. I'm like, yes, no, I am white and I am not. But I get added by Brazilian players all the time saying BR. Like, nope, sorry.
No. Do you know how to say no in Portuguese?
I did because I grew up in Little Portugal, but I forget. I used to. It's been a long time. But I grew up in Fall River, which was basically half the population would vacation in the Azores in the summer.
Got you.
Yeah. We got there, but so I had the same kind of thing happen, and I had another comment about what you just said, but I completely forgot what it was. That train has left the station. If I remember it, I'll come back to it.
Fire away.
So what about Wild is grabbing you more than Standard?
Sure. So I think I really started my engagement, like kind of took off at Hearthstone, watching Raffles content. And so like OG Raffle, if you remember, Pandemic Raffle was peak. Like the variety of things you could do in Wild, the cool things you could do in Wild, the cards you could play, the funny combos you could pull off. When I played Wild, like the first time Cthulhu triggered was like, mind blowing. Like, wait, what the hell is that? Wait, what's going on there? Why is it why is everything they play ramping it up? Oh God, it's come down. It's killed me. And so like just kind of that kind of absurdity I enjoyed. And I would, I was one of these guys where I'd take my standard deck and I'd try to climb a little bit in Wild. Yeah, why not? And it didn't really, I'd try both formats, and Wild just sort of ended up, suiting me in the long term. I think more and more as time has gone on, Jack Harris, who was a I guess we'll call him famous Wild Hearthstone streamer, a really good Hearthstone player, once described Standard as like being on trial. Like losing a Standard game is like being on trial. Like you face the indictment. No, you can't have bail. You're working through your appeals process. You're looking at all your outs. You're doing your best to delay the trial. And you did it. And just so like losing in Standard feels so bad because it feels like it happens in slow motion, and you can kind of see it happening slowly but surely. And it doesn't feel like there's as many comeback mechanisms. Whereas in Wild, things are so unbalanced at times and things are so powerful that the games can be shorter. The games can be more imbalanced. There are swings in momentum that can happen that mean that you're never really out of it. And so aside from the sheer variety that I think Wild usually sports more so than Standard, which is not always the case. Sometimes, Standard has had more variety than Wild. But just with the recent philosophy, I think it's largely been more diverse in Wild. And, I just like seeing that variety in those powerful strategies.
Awesome. So are there any specific like archetype of decks that you lean towards, or like what are your favorite like 3 decks?
I will play anything. I will say that my weakest as a streamer is a combo deck, because there's a lot of combo decks I don't naturally gravitate towards. I need time. I need reps to be good at combo decks. That being said, one of the first decks that I ever got 11x with that you'll find like old Neon tweets of me on is Ignite Mage, which is a knuckle dragging drooler combo deck. But I loved Ignite Mage. I've got a Mechathune on there. Some really pedantic Redditors would say Odin Warrior isn't a control deck, it's a combo deck. Because, apparently when you play control, you're just supposed to remove your opponent's stuff and wait for fatigue to kill them, according to Reddit, at least Wild Reddit. I don't know about Standard Reddit. That I can only handle one Reddit at a time, and the mental ones in my Wild Reddit are enough. So, you could argue that Odin Warrior is to a certain extent a combo deck. So, I say that combo is my weakest archetype, but I'll play a little bit of everything. And a lot of the decks I play now, and a lot of the decks that are in Wild, have some element of combo to them, or some element of miracle to them. So, they sort of blend the line between your combo aggro. I don't know if mid range exists except outside of Arena anymore. That kind of thing.
Okay. What is your favorite class and favorite deck of all time?
So I have to double check my total wins, but my favorite class, if I were to guess, is probably the one I have the most wins with. And I have the most wins with Mage. I recently surpassed 4,800 wins with Mage. So it's got to be Mage. Favorite decks inside of Mage include, I loved Secret Mage for a long time. I played a lot of Ignite Mage. But honestly, I really enjoy decks that I have to sit down and learn. And decks that I've taken the time to put in the reps to figure it out. Okay, so I've won 31,000 games. 31,301 games, which is a lot of games. Basically, my only classes that are sub 3K functionally are Demon Hunter and Death Knight. Those are around 2K-ish. By far, I have the most in Mage. I think the second most is Druid at 3,700. So I play way more Mage than basically anything else. Right now, I think my favorite, one of my favorite decks in Wild is Hostage Mage, because it has such sort of a flat baseline and it's sort of solitary and you're doing your thing. And if you pull off your thing, you win. You know, I took time to learn that deck, though. I took time to learn Odin Warrior. I wasn't very good at it, and then I sort of figured it out and figured out how to play it. I had a great control paladin that would farm aggro shamans and you know, even shaman bots and stuff like that, and that got me to legend many times. I have all kinds of I play such a variety of things. It's hard to pin down exactly what specific decks, but I'd say if there's a type of deck that I enjoy the most, it's the ones that I've taken time to learn and get a lot of reward from expressing skill once using that deck.
Awesome. So how'd you find yourself to be on the Born to Be Wild podcast?
Yeah, this is a weird one. I was basically a poop poster in Twitch chats for a long time, and I kind of like figured out how to play Secret Mage well enough to hit Legend fairly early in the month, and so I was posting in the Born to Be Wild Discord because I was listening to the show and I was tuning in on Friday nights, and I was kind of being a groupie. And so I'd post when I hit Legend, and then Nate was like, they were on a kick where they always kind of wanted a guest, and I guess it was a slow week. They're like, hey, we see you're like hitting Legend pretty early. You want to come on and talk about Secret Mage? And I was like, yeah, sure. And it was kind of like serendipitous because I got invited on essentially the episode before Dark Moon Fair launched officially, when we got all these Secret Mage cards and Secret Mage became tier 1. And so I got to talk about how I would play Secret Mage and my Secret Mage deck and like hitting Legend early. And I did that. And it was pretty cool because like the episode took off. The episode had like 1,000 views and whatnot. Like it was just sort of crazy. I think it's still their most watched episode of all time. And I was sort of hanging around tangentially after that. And then slowly but surely, Nate Wolf, when he was still running the podcast, would kind of be like, hey, one of the co-hosts is sick. You want to come on and kind of like slide in and do the thing? And I was like, yeah, sure. I can help co-host. And so I'd come on and I'd co-host. And that sort of unofficial, like, fourth cast member or just sort of stand-in was really cool to do, and was fairly frequent for, a year and a half. And then they got accepted into the creator program. And getting accepted into the creator program, Nate being a lawyer, they had to kind of like tighten up. And so I was no longer in the loop as far as what the pod was doing, guests they were having on, because I wasn't officially part of the podcast. I wasn't officially NDA'd. So I kind of got cut out for a hot minute, which is fine because, like, again, they were just covering liabilities. And so, in that hiatus, I started streaming myself and started doing things. And then when Nate decided he couldn't do the podcast anymore, Sheep and Hydra were like, hey, you want to come back in an official capacity? And I was like, sure. Sounds like fun. I miss having an event to do on Friday nights. And so I hopped on, and we've been a happy wild family ever since.
Awesome. So as far as like your content creation goes, do you do any extra content creation other than the podcast and streaming?
Extra than that, no. I mean, I have a YouTube channel that's essentially highlights of what I do on Twitch. The Twitch is mostly centered on playing viewer decks. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a Keith Numbers. Okay. Keith Numbers was a very influential wild streamer, again, around that like COVID pandemic time. He was kind of like wild. I describe him as like wild after dark. So like you'd go in, there's a lot of swearing, there's a lot of sarcasm. He'd take your viewer deck, he'd eviscerate it, he'd talk about how crap it was, he'd queue it up anyway, he'd play it, and he'd complain the entire time about, what parts of it were non-functional and why he was going to lose, and then he'd win anyway. And so he did that a lot. Meta decks, non-meta decks, homebrew cooks, a little bit easier to do in previous metas when things weren't so hyper-synergized. But he did that for at least, I think it was like almost 2 years. And so when I decided I was going to stream, I thought I would bring that back because there was no real outlet for streamers in Wild who are playing viewer decks. Not seriously. Maxi Bond, who just recently won the Masters Tour, most recent Masters Tour, sort of does that on his stream. Martian Boo, who was a big Wild streamer during the day, did it and stopped doing it, made it more exclusive because he found that viewer decks were getting not keeping up with the power level of Wild as it was progressing. And so I thought it was an important outlet and a service to the community to sort of do that with my stream. And so that's mostly the focus of what I do, while also sort of analyzing the meta, trying to highlight when I get a meta deck or I get slipped a meta deck by somebody that's looking promising or looks cool, highlighting it and talking about why it might be good in the future and kind of going from there.
Nice. So you have a degree in physics. What was your motivation there? Like, did you just really like it as a subject? And you just wanted to study it more?
So I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was probably like a sophomore in high school. Like I was pretty convinced that I liked high school. I could see myself being a high school teacher, interacting with young people. I liked this. I like the smarminess. I like the sarcasm. I like the idea that in a very important moment of their maturation, I tell my students all the time, like, I like hanging out with you guys because you're almost real people. Like, I like being a part of that maturation and sort of guiding them along in a difficult time, because no matter what the question is, I will try to be like my dad, who was an editor for the New York Times, the man who knows a little bit of something about everything, who can talk to anybody about anything. But the thing that really kind of grabbed me about physics is when I took physics was an explanation for why things happen. It's basically all about problem solving. It's basically all about how our universe works. And I feel personally, from a biased standpoint, that all sciences sort of branch out of this basic part of, it's all physics to start with. Chemists will say it's all chemistry. They're just physicists that have a really cool Lego set. And it is a really cool Lego set, but it's all of their stuff is all is all complex electromagnetic interactions. So like, get wrecked, chemists. And so looking at that, I just want to learn more physics. I want to learn more about why the universe works and how it works and answer questions, because and I learned this in a philosophy class. The source of all unhappiness is the inability to solve a problem. So the more problems you can solve, the happier you will be. So physics makes me happier.
I like that. That's really cool. I've never heard that quote before.
Yeah, and I have yet to find it proven false.
That's great. So, Schmoopy,
well, that makes sense. That makes sense, though, what he's saying. So the phrase "more money, more problems." So money does make you happy, because you have more money, more problems. You can solve those problems. Then you're happy.
Have we finally broke? Well, the thing is, if you have more money, more problems crop up because people want to spend your money for you. And is that something you can really, is that something you can control, or is that something outside of your locus of control?
I've never had that problem to worry about.
I'm a public school teacher. Absolutely. I make the aggressively medium bucks.
So, Schmoopy, what is something people might find surprising to learn about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that I was an athlete, that I was a fairly competitive athlete, that I played in college. It was D3, but like we played in SUNYAC division in New York, which is, one of the biggest states, and there's a lot of really good athletes who need to go to a state school because they don't have a ton of money, and so that was a fairly competitive division, and so I played soccer at a high level for a long time for somebody who, started by toeing the ball in the 90s, as far as I could, into learning the more complicated game that is sort of, what we're trying to coach today. It's funny coaching my son. The guy who's kind of running our program is just like, we're not booting it anymore, guys. I don't want to hear boot it from you ever. Because so much of the old soccer philosophy was risk aversion and just kick it as far as you can. Because if you don't have the ball is fear. If you don't have the ball, you don't have fear. And now it's much more possession based. Now it's much more skill based. It's they got to be good with their feet. And I have some of those skills and I have some of that training, but it's very different. And so I think some people might find it surprising. At least I know viewers find it surprising when I can talk, like, I was a sports nerd. They find it surprising when I can talk sports with them.
It's funny you say that. So I've been doing some assistant coaching on my son's soccer team too, and I was just telling one of the girls I was playing defense the other day. It's like, yeah, you want to control and dribble and get it out there and make a good pass, but if you are surrounded by the other team and you have an opening, just boot it out of there, get it down range, get it out of there, and deal with it later. Like, so I guess maybe that's wrong now, right?
Well, it's not. I won't say it's wrong. It's not in vogue. It's not in vogue. Meanwhile, I had a Hungarian coach who would tell us we had a level of play somewhat lower than whale poop. He didn't use the word whale poop, and we were 12. And he goes, "Sons, I want you to boot it." And he would try to figure out which way, like the orientation of the field. He goes, "That way. That way is east. I want you to kick it that way to Boston, and that way to California." Right. And so like he would just sort of scream at us as far as like what he expected. And he would prefer that we had, you know, in his words, he'd prefer we played attractive and effective, but above all effective. And I think right now there's a little bit more of a emphasis towards the attractive. And I have my own misgivings as to whether or not that is going to ultimately be effective. But I think that's for a sports podcast.
That's fair. All right. Well, we obviously brought Schmoopy on to talk a little bit about Wild, and we've had other people before, like Hydra, his co-host Hydra and Sheep, talk about kind of the state of Wild. I thought we'd take a little different approach today, and I thought we'd talk about maybe selling the standard player on Wild, like, because looking at Wild can be kind of daunting, right? It's like, well, standard, you only have so many card sets, and you can hear about the meta ad nauseum. Just go on Twitter. You'll find out what people are complaining about will be the top decks. And then you can hit the reports and all that. But Wild is a little bit more expansive. So to try to get yourself in Wild, much like Duels was back in the day, it's kind of the barrier of entry. Maybe not be as bad as it seems, but it feels like it's a big barrier of entry. And part of the barrier of entry is just kind of the overwhelming amount of it, especially if somebody that hasn't been playing since beta. So, what would you say to somebody that is a standard player that's a little Wild curious but has yet to take the plunge? Sure.
So, I think the first thing you have to think about as far as the wild card pool goes is like 75+% of it is absolute unplayable garbage. The power creep is real. It's not a dirty word. You're not going to hear me here power creep being so mad about power creep, because card games get boring if you don't have power creep. We can talk about healthy power creep and unhealthy power creep. We can talk about how, like, why on God's green earth did they print Reno Lone Ranger in the form that he's in? Right. And I can get real grumpy about that. But for the most part, like, most of wild cards are crap. So places you would go. The first thing I would do is for a standard player that's wild curious, I would direct them to somebody like me, my stream. I do videos all the time about cheap decks or meta decks, what's good, especially after expansions and balance patches and mini sets. Tempo Storm is a great resource. Vicious Syndicate used to be a good resource, but I don't think they've done a report in 2+ years. But spend a little time in a wild stream, and it doesn't have to be mine. It could be like someone like Martian Booze, and just ask about what's meta, what's good, and get a meta deck, right? And then once you get your meta deck, go win. Because if you don't have any real MMR in Wild, you are going to do a lot of winning. I've heard some critiques of Wild Wild is so boring. All I play are bots. Well, if you have like a 2 or 3 star bonus, you're actually in prime bot territory. Most of the competitive bots have been squashed by the team. When the China server was put on lockdown, there were a lot of companies that were helping players start over anew, that were botting, that were trying to sort of milk money from the system, so that money value, I should say, from the game, so that they could build up their collections quickly and play what they wanted to. Because the funny thing about Wild, which we're going to kind of cover extensively tonight, is it's not expensive to do well in Wild. It's expensive to meme. So if you want to or if you want to play one of your Reno piles, fine. That's going to be a pile of dust. That's okay. But at least there's a lot of similar cards across those cross sections that are good. but it's not hard to do well in Wild, especially if you're okay with playing a fast combo or an aggro deck. So you're going to do a lot of winning, and you probably won't need to know what your opponent is doing because you're probably going to have a very direct game plan, and you're going to either make them die or they're going to make you die before you figure out what that is. So, like, you know, you kind of can do your own thing. The last thing I'm going to say about it is my wife wanted to know what I was doing on my phone so much. And so she wanted to, at first in secret, download Hearthstone, make her own profile, and then like hit Legend or meet me in Legend and be like, ha, see, I can do it too. But she did in fact let me in on the secret. And so since her first month of playing Wild, was the first month of Stormwind. So it was basically all Seedlock, which was a very degenerate, very meta warping, very tier S dominant deck. She was playing an off-meta budget deck in Scimitar Rogue, which I had given to her because I really liked it, and I thought it was kind of a cool deck and that she'd enjoy it. She went to 4 boss battles. 4 boss battles. I thought like she was going to get to like gold. She grinded it out. She got to 4 boss battles. She did not hit Legend. The next month I gave her a meta deck. She hit Legend. She's hit Legend ever since. And then I tell her, I'm like, babe, you realize some people like in their entire time playing Hearthstone, they never hit Legend. And she's like,
yeah, that's me.
She's like, she's toxic. She's like, what are they, like, bad? Like, what, like, why aren't they just play a good deck? And she's like, she's brutal. I swear to God, she's way more toxic a partner than I am. And so, like, I think you, Dr. McButt, if you sat down with a Wild deck and really stuck to it and were willing to play 60, 70 games, you too could be a Wild legend. It's just a matter of what style do you like to play, and do you want to play it, and do you have the fortitude to want to do that? Because like, you know, you get the games and you are going to get there, and as horrible as the things that Wild can do to you, it is fairly accessible and really cheap.
He could do the same in Standard too if he just, you know, stuck with it for a couple weeks. But anyway,
hey, I do play Standard again.
But then you said like, oh well, you know, I was climbing and then
Wild's faster. I mean,
then,
you say you have ADHD. I mean, like, you know, what, we take way less attention span. We have way more neurodivergent players.
But I wanted to ask you, you were talking about power creep a little bit there. They just recently, when they released the Wild exclusive set, you know, the whatever, that they fixed a bunch of cards. And they raised the power level on a bunch of them. Did that actually change anything? Did it make those cards better?
Okay. Okay. So I was not a part of Born to Be Wild during this section. So like Born to Be Wild was like, they got to interview Matt London. They got to like basically embrace this Wild exclusive expansion with both arms. I got to be curmudgeon on the sideline and kind of jerkish about it. That was not a Wild expansion. That was a Twist expansion. The things that they pushed in that expansion were power level for Twist and came up woefully short in most places for the power level that was required in Wild. Except for some weird stuff like Shadow Bomber, which was already one of the best cards in a meta aggro deck in Aggro Shadow Priest. And Matt London got it buffed, and I quote him, because Shadow Priest is my favorite deck, Lamau. We got Secret Mage, which was a meta deck at the time. Cabal Crystal Runner was one of the best cards, and it got +1 attack. Why? Nobody could tell. Was Cabal Crystal Runner a card played in Twist after the Caverns of Time expansion? No. Disco Lock was absolutely bastado in post Caverns of Time. We got a location that was a 2 mana, 3 charges, choose one of 3 cards and discard it. In a deck that is discard it and then draw 2 cards. In a deck that is starving for draw, starving for refill, has a ton of discard outlets. It was absurd. Tiny Knight of Evil was buffed to 2+2+ every time you discard a card. Dark Bargain was 3 mana, discard 2 cards, which again, if one of my cards is, if this gets discarded, deal 5 damage, which can go face, and the Fist, which can deal another 4 face, or I can make a free 2/5 taunt. Caverns of Time basically made Discard Warlock tier S in Wild, which a lot of Wild players see it as a high variance, low skill level, goofy deck. So, like, was Caverns of Time a popular or good time in Wild? No. Because, number one, we were kind of promised, like, a Wild exclusive expansion, which we took to be as, oh, this is going to be an expansion that sort of addresses some of Wild's issues, or maybe raises the power level, or buffs some like long forgotten cards and brings up the Wild power level. And like, I mean, great job bringing Cthulhu to an 8 mana 6/6. Like, yeah, nice. Okay. Can I play Cthulhu in a meta deck? No, nowhere close. So it was woefully short of what was promised, and in fact was a Trojan horse for something completely different. And some would say even like an unhealthy monetization sort of way, where it's like, oh, spend a bunch of money on Caverns of Time, get all the signatures, blah, 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 blah. Like, it just, I could wax poetic on what a crap show Caverns of Time was. It was not a good time in Wild. And many people post Caverns of Time were disillusioned and disarrayed.
Fair enough. But so in general, though, the bringing up the cards, if they weren't trying to sell a new set to sell Twist, do you wish that they kind of at times would bring up the power level of old cards, or would you just rather see them introduce new cards?
Well, ancillarily, they sort of do that anyway now, don't they? Like, they will bring Wild exclusive cards to core a lot now. And when they do that, they tend to like touch them up a little bit and buff them up a little. Like, because of you guys, we got, because of Malfurion's Gift, we have Wild Growth at 2 again. That's been a very significant card in Wild. We've seen Reno Druid, which can now run like 6 copies of Wild Growth, take off, and was a tier 1 deck for a period of time. Just like sort of slow druids, mill druids can take advantage of it now. One of the decks we might talk tonight about, Spell Damage Druid, a brand new tier 1 deck, takes advantage of that. I mean, it's not to say that, I like buffs. I think buffs are good. I think buffs for old cards is brilliant, and something that they should absolutely leverage, because they've already gone through the time and energy to create the card. So why go through the time and energy to sort of design and sort of make something new, when instead what they can do is they can buff something that's old that functionally does the same thing? Like, they've already done like 90% of the work. You just have to modernize it.
And that's interesting, right? Because part of a question we have down later on in the thing is part of the selling point of Wild, at least initially, was you can go back and play those old decks that you used to love to play, because they're still there in Wild. Like, I can go play Patron Warrior, I can go play whatever. Is that accurate? Or is that just kind of like, has Wild just so far past?
You can absolutely go play those decks. Don't expect for them to be meta or for you to win. I mean, they're not technically wrong. Like, I don't think yeah, I can use my old code and I can go play Wild and I can go play my favorite Wild deck, but like at some MMRs, it's going to be completely unplayable. And that's just like, that's a reality of things. Like, I think it's unreasonable to think that that's going to be playable forever. There's casual Wild for a reason. It's funny. That was more like the Ixar kind of like era of like, yeah, this is what Wild is for. I think we've moved past that at this point. But you can go play your old cards, sure. But like, don't expect it to be meta for very long.
All right, before we get a little side tangent, sorry. Do you think that Wild is? Do you think there should be another format that works with Wild? Like, right now we have Wild, you have everything. Do you think there should be more of a, maybe like a rotating block of cards, sets, or any kind of different way to play Wild with your old cards? That, I mean, obviously I'm not talking about duos or duels, or I keep saying duels or something or that, but like, do you think that is there a cry for older or different ways to play with Wild, or is just Wild?
So right now there's a little bit of a schism in the Wild community. There's a lot of people who are sort of unhappy with the format, but at the same time they're still playing it, but just kind of want to complain about it. And there's also a little bit of a sea shift where like some of the big names in Wild content creation, Corbett, Get Meowth, Raffles basically moved on to a completely different game entirely, and when he does play Hearthstone, he plays like standard. Wild in and of itself is going through a transition where a lot of the old guard is just sort of says, this is not the game that I want to play, and they take their ball and they go home. Which in part is like a reason why what I'm doing and when I'm streaming, I kind of find it important, because I feel like we need another wave of people kind of coming in and sort of seeing the game as it is. And there's fun to be had. It's just different. And I don't know about you guys. I see so many more Hearthstone ads now than I have in the past. And I think like standard in a similar way is not like the standard of years past. Like it's a different game. And that's okay. Like people will find it appealing, but they kind of need to bring them in. They kind of need to find them. They kind of have to use the marketing to refill the ranks to almost like staunch this narrative of like Hearthstone is dying. And like I see a lot of the Hearthstone is dying a lot because I'm in the wild community and I'm with the degenerates, and I'm with the degenerates that are deciding whether or not they can continue to be degenerate in the format. And so like I'm closer to like the crazy people who are calling it quits. And I see more of like the crazier takes, and we have more of the content creators too that dip their toe in the format, like 1 out of every 7 days. We will not name them, who say, "Oh yeah, Wild's dead," and then they continue to do it, and like it's in a really weird spot. And amongst the schools of thought, there are some people who say, "Well, we should just unnerf everything." And I think, and I've seen a lot of people that I respect have this train of thought in this take. I think those people are burned out, and I think that it's lunacy. I think it's lunacy to have a format where everything is unnerfed, because very, very, very quickly it becomes just all fast combo. And that sounds like my personal hell. I don't want to play all fast combo. I like playing a mixture of aggro, control, and combo, which I think we have right now. I think it's a fallacy that they never touch the format now. I mean, we've had 2 major rounds of nerfs now. Mm-hmm. 2 expansions in a row. Like this is the most they've touched Wild in forever. We got Quest Mage got nerfed to only once per game. Incredible, right? We don't have to sit through a million animations to see if they scuff their combo, replaying Time Warp 45 times in a row. Great. Now we just have Hostage Mage. But listen, that's another conversation for another time. For some reason, they nuked Sorcerer's Apprentice, which nobody can quite figure out. Including myself. But we also got changes to Miracle Rogue, which was basically problematic and holding half the meta down. And the meta is much more diverse since its expiration. So, like, I think there's a healthy mix somewhere. If we're going to get a new format that kind of interacts with Wild, I would love to see a twist season where everything's unnerfed. And the reason why I want to see a twist season where everything's unnerfed and everybody can get access to everything is because I want people to see what a profoundly stupid idea it is, and dislike it and never call for it ever again.
Well, I really wish they would have done was when they did I hear what you're saying on that, but when they did the month-long, hey, it's a new meta every day twist, like I think they should have just made that a week-long for every single, like each meta had a week instead of a day, because it really felt like you didn't have a chance to play. You kind of missed something, and then you just like I never played it because it's like, oh, I really want to do this. That was one of the cooler twists. Never did. So and yeah, now we have no twist. Now we have no twist. Why not just make that extend out for months and you still have that same thing and all that? But yeah, they don't recruit Wild. That's the thing. It's like when they're recruiting players, when they're bringing players in, everything is geared towards getting people to play standard. Sure. There's no like you don't get loner decks for Wild. You don't get the returning decks for Wild. There's no incentive to go to Wild. It's just you have to find. You
want my tinfoil hat? My tinfoil hat take? Sure. You have to pay money. You have to constantly spend money to stay up with standard. The top deck in standard shifts way more than it does in Wild. And that was another thing that pushed me from standard to Wild full time, because I was sick of trying to figure out what sort of like fringe legendary I was crafting for the perfect insert standard meta deck, versus like Wild, the meta stays fairly stable. Like something that's good now is at least playable long term. Like unless it gets nerfed to absolute oblivion, and nerfs happen very rarely in Wild. So, shifts in meta happen and stuff like that. But like, it's a more stable meta, and so it's more budget friendly in a lot of ways.
speaking of budget friendly, so let's say someone listening to this now, they're a standard player. They're like, all right, I'll give Wild a chance, but I don't want to spend a lot. I don't have a lot of dust. They're not a whale. They're a free to play player, or they're minimal dust. What are some budget friendly decks that you would recommend for, say, like each of the archetypes that someone could go play Wild without a big investment, just to kind of get some experience, see if they like it?
How much dust do you consider a budget deck? Out of curiosity.
I would say no more than like a legendary or two, and then maybe not a ton of things. So I don't know, maybe like 4,000, 5,000,
5,000, 6,000 ish.
I don't know, because I always have all the cards, so I can't. It's a problem that I have, that I can't kind of I can't.
You don't remember what you got for free.
I'm just kidding.
I bet. Like you don't even like, it just comes in. You're like, oh yeah. Because I'm the same way.
Right. No. And I'm kidding about the poor people, because I understand. Like I play enough. I play so much Hearthstone that it is investment that I play, that I put my money and my time in. And I always get kind of mad when people are complaining about what Hearthstone, like, oh, we can't get to this skin because you have to get 12 wins or that. I'm like, we get so much free stuff from Hearthstone all the time. The rewards track, which you pay for, but like the top part, the rewards track is really, really good. We get events all the time that give us free things. They've fallen behind in some things, like the Twitch drops have been a little more minimal. We used to get the Amazon Prime thing that's kind of used to be like a pack. Now it's like, then it was a legendary, then it was a rare or something like that. So like they've fallen behind on some places, but overall, I think that Hearthstone's very generous as far as the stuff that we get for free, but people are going to complain about it. People are going to complain. So I don't know how I would describe a budget deck, and except for think about somebody that doesn't have a lot of dust and probably wants that dust more for standard than Wild. So maybe like a legendary 2, or how about this? How about decks that they can pick? And maybe I should have mentioned this before when we were writing the show notes, that have reusable legendaries. That like, hey, if I'm going to play some cheap decks, I can use this legendary across maybe 2 or 3 or 4 decks, because then that becomes more of a budget thing. It's like buy once, run everywhere. It's Java.
Well, I said I came prepared, so I want to just test the waters to see, like, perspective wise, what you thought a budget deck was, because I have a deck on here that costs less than 2,000 dust. So it costs less than a legendary, and honestly, I haven't loaded up in a Wild. You probably have most of the cards. That's Treant Druid. So that's an example of like
I was gonna guess Treant Druid. That's an example of
an example of a deck that costs less than, almost basically a legendary. I did a big run with it, free to play run. The only free to play run I've done off my main account. I mostly just play my main account. But I took Trino and Droyer to 11x territory on a 7x bonus. I hit legend with it a couple months ago, and I've played the deck since, and it's fine. It's a little bit of a complicated pilot. It's happy that Rogue has gotten nerfed, because there's no pirate rogues to pick on it anymore, and there's less like board-based aggro, and you can kind of make a giant board of big stuff. So Pirate DH kind of cries in its sleep when you face it. But it's fine. It's good. That's for aggro. Treant Druid. You could probably still play, again, staying with aggro. You can kind of still play Pirate Rogue. Secret Passage is nerfed. It's the single worst card in Pirate Rogue now, so get rid of it. Maybe we sub in Dig for Treasure or something like that. The whole deck itself, if you take out the secret passages, leaves it at like 3k dust. Very affordable. You probably have most of the deck. The deck's all like commons and rares at that point. The only legendary would be your crafting patches. You might say, well, Schmoopy, I don't need to craft patches. Craft freaking patches, okay? Like any pirate deck that you play in Wild from now until forever is going to run patches. It's a good legendary to craft. It's -1 card in your deck, and it's great tempo. But Schmoopy, I hit legend without crafting patches. Yeah, I get it. But you're dumb for not doing it. There's also kind of spell damage druid. I know there's a version of this in standard that Maxi Bond was playing. If you look at the spell damage druid list on like Neon 31's website, you look at the dust and you see that it's 11,000, roughly Oh no, this one is let's see. Yeah, it's like 11,000 dust, and you're like, well, that's a lot of dust, Schmoopy. I don't know about this. Well, you want Guff for sure. So hopefully you still have Guff, or maybe you deleted Guff when he got nerfed a million times. That's fine. But there's stuff like Floop's Gloop included in that dust count that, like, it's a really good card, but you don't need to craft it. Renathal was free. ETC was free. So there's at least 3,200 dust that the bot program is picking up as things you need to craft that you don't actually need to craft. Mista Vista, you guys use Mista Vista all the time in Standard, right? Like that's a good Standard card, and will probably be a good Standard card in the meta for. I think the tourist mechanic has been really strong, right? Like, I mean, that's been something like having access to that category of catalog of cards has opened up a lot of deck building. So like having Mista Vista is good stuff. And then I think the only other legendary that I think we really cared about from there, yeah, just Guffed and Mista Vista. Like, I don't think there's a whole lot else. It's all like, there's a couple rares, like Sleep Under the Stars. You probably already have Sleep Under the Stars. It's a really good Standard card, right? Everything else is just commons and rares. Keeping with control decks, do we like Odin? Do we like playing Odin decks or no? Maybe? No Odin? Okay. So if you had Odin, which has been a powerful Standard card, continues to be a powerful Standard card, I could probably cook a budget list. One of the things that has sort of unlocked a lot of potential in Odin Warrior in the wild part of Standard, well, there's two things. Number one, the wild list of Odin Warrior. One of the things that unlocked it was somebody said, wait, the Warrior cards are bad. Let's run the Druid cards. And so we run New Heights, and we run Sleep Under the Stars, and we run Ham in it. And that sort of has like the XL list, and that has sort of brought the list together. Did you guys play the Brawliseum at all when it came out? Okay.
No, I avoid those.
I got 2 12-win runs with Odin Warrior. I'd never gotten one 12-win run before. I'd gotten 11, and I'd come up short, and then came woefully short the other runs then. But I did 3 runs for the Brawliseum. I did one pirate DH run, and I went 2 and 3. And I said, never again, I'm going to grief the rogues. And then I played Odin Warrior to 12 off stream. And then on stream, I played a 12-win run. So you can check it out. You can look at the list. It's really good. If you're somebody who pays for the battle pass, you got a Diamond Geppetto Joymancer. That card, much mocked because of an event quest that we got, where it's just like you had to either play or defeat a Geppetto Joymancer. That card's really nasty in a really large, in an XL version of the Odin list, because do you guys remember Risky Skipper? Armorsmith, those turns? So I'm basically using that with Razorfen Rockstar and Odin up to deal, like, I think last week I hit a mage for 173 damage. I could probably build a budget version of that deck, but that would require a cook. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know what that list would look like. I'd have to sit down and really think about how I'd build the deck, but there's enough pieces between this and core that you could probably piece something together that's playable. Questline Mage in Wild plays a lot more control. It basically feeds on aggro and then pops you in the snoot. And if you're slow and dirtily and you're just sort of sitting there, that's cool. It'll go through its quest line and it'll pop you in the snoot. It runs one legendary. It runs the quest line. That's it. It runs, sometimes it runs, Norgannon's Favor or whatever, Wisdom of Norgannon. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I've seen some versions cut it. I'm kind of in favor of cutting it. But it's a very budget friendly list, and it's basically all commons and rares. Questline Mage that I found off of Neon 31's website is 4,860 dust. You probably have the cards, pretty cheap. If you already play, like, I'm thinking Spell Mage, like there's just like the all Spell Mage in Standard, it's basically built like that, but with a little bit of extra wild burn and some scam in it. Like, we play Ice Block and stuff. So, like, you probably want to craft Ice Block. Let's see. So that's for control. For mid-range, I have a joke here. Lamau mid-range, unlucky. But the closest thing I have to mid-range here is Questline Demon Hunter. Questline Demon Hunter is a little bit worse into aggro, but if you remember Brute Me Dude, you're basically doing that. You're doing Brute Me Dude, and you have the Vengeful Wallopers, but the finisher now is the Demon Hunter Tourist, where any damage you receive on your turn gets sent to an enemy at random, sprayed around. So you get a glaive tar up, and you play a bunch of outcast cards, and after they finally clear your board of brutes, you drop Arana, Thrill Seeker, and you swing, and you go ha 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 ha, as basically the Demon Seed effect takes effect and sprays a bunch of damage at your opponent, and you OTK them with that. That deck is fairly affordable. It's mostly rares and commons. You probably already have Arana for standard. No? Maybe? Is Arana played?
Mm-hmm.
Ish? Right?
Yeah. I've played her a few times.
So she's around. She's around. So she's someone you probably have lying around. Patches the Pilot. Do you guys have Patches the Pilot?
Mm-hmm.
Typically you'd have Patches the Pilot. I have this list minus Patches is like 7,000 dust. So if you think about it, like there's no epics here. So that's basically all on the legendaries. So you're probably crafting the quest line if you've dusted the quest line. But the quest line is going to be, some people say, a problematic card in Wild for a long, long time, because those little Emperor Thaurissan ticks for each stage are going to get more and more significant as draw gets better and as combos get cheaper and as we figure out things we can do with them. So I think it's probably a long-term good craft. That's my mid-range. We've talked about aggro. Have we? Yeah, kind of.
Tree and Druid?
Yeah, Tree and Druid is I love Tree and Druid. It dies to one board clear. But if you have the testicular fortitude to hang around for a long time, to build board after board after board, eventually you get to drop a bunch of the board buffs on it and go face, and it's funny, ha ha ha.
I was always a big fan of the Drum Druid, so you know.
Yeah, me too.
It's the Wild version has a little bit of miracle to it. Like the turn that you go in, you can play a lot of cards very quickly, and Funnel Cake is a hell of a card and is very degenerate. And so you're basically like funnel caking, and you're lightning blooming, and you're innervating, and you're basically printing mana, and you're dropping, owls, and you're dropping blood treants. And, you basically go from 2 little 2/2s to I've drawn 18 cards and I've made a board of 8/8s or 6/6s or something, right? It's very goofy how quickly things escalate. And a lot of things in the format can't really handle that huge a power escalation. Like that's just like that sort of board dump is just sort of game over. You can't clear it. Which is why I think it's, especially for the low price of less than 2,000 dust, like it's worth a punt. The traditional aggro decks that are good right now, Pirate DH and Shadow Priest, they do have some legendaries. Like they usually top out at like 6,000, 7,000 dust. I always include them on a budget deck, but like I feel like they're creeping more and more towards not being budget. I will say the fact that like something like Hosen Roughhouser being meta in Shadow Priest now is making it a little bit more budget friendly. We are cutting some of the epics and we're putting in some more of the commons. We're going more towards pirates, which is good. That's a good sign for the budget players. But we haven't even gotten to combo yet. The deck that I took the legend this month was Miracle Priest. And now what Miracle Priest does is it takes Radiant Elemental, a common, and it plays a bunch of stuff on itself, like Power Word Shield or Anduin's Gift into Power Word Shield, 2 commons. Plays Divine Spirit, which doubles my minion's health, a common. And then I'm either going to play Bless, a rare, or I'm play Inner Fire, a common, and basically set my minion's attack equal to its health and boop you in the schnoot. And you can get lethal as early as turn 3 with a good draw. Radiant Elemental's reducing all your spells by 1 mana, by the way, while we're doing this. That deck is super, super, super cheap. Miracle, where is it, my miracles? I didn't write down my miracle. From memory, it's like 3k dust. It's like it's there's no legendaries. It's all commons and rares. You can play some epics, like Shadow Word Devour is good because there's so many pirates in the meta. And also, if you make a big whiteboard of stuff and you play Shadow of Devour on something, all of a sudden it gets big health very quickly. There's a couple of other epics that make sense. I think Shadow Visions is no longer core. So unfortunately, that's another epic that you have to craft, but it's a good card. But yeah, Miracle Priest is what I would absolutely play if I was learning Wild and I wanted to play it, because it's a tier 1 deck and it's very fun. And again, playing a lot of cards very quickly. Very, 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 very cool. Charge Druid. Have you guys heard about Charge Druid?
No.
So Charge Druid, for the uninitiated, you basically play Dorian out, and then you play something called Juicy Psych Melon. Dr. McButt, dude, have you heard of Juicy Psych Melon? Is that triggering some PTSD?
It, yeah. Yeah.
So that's gonna draw, in this case, Lorthamar, Colifero, Aviana, and ANR. Now, you guys probably have ANR crafted for Standard, I would assume, right? Like, ANR is a pretty good card in Standard. It's a great card in Wild, too. Aviana is a great Wild card. That's something you'd probably need to craft. Colifero was free. Lorthamar was free. What you do is you play your Lorthamar, you play your Aviana, your 1-mana Aviana, you play your Lorthamars, you play ANR, or you have to, like, however you need to set it up as far as mana goes. You might have to do Dollmaster, Melon, ANR, refresh your mana. You get the idea. But you basically make a board of stuff, and then you drop your Colifero. And your Colifero is trying to copy one of the 2 to 3 charge minions that are in your deck that Lorthamar has now double buffed. And so you're sending face like 46, 40 attack Leroys, 20 attack Leroys, Reckless Rocketeers. A lot of the lists that are listed right now are using Dread Deserters. I don't think the Dread Deserters are as good as the Reckless Rocketeers or the Leroy. Leroy is in core. So despite the list being like 11,000 dust, when you really break it down and look at it, most of the legendaries you already have for free in some form or capacity. And the other one, and like ANR, you should already have for Standard. So really and Dorian came with a mini set. So really the only legendary you're crafting is Aviana, and Aviana is Bastardo. So you probably want to keep Aviana. You probably want to craft Aviana if you want to play any form of slow druid in the future. Because Bran, Aviana, Astalor is the kind of game-winning combo that's going to be around forever until it gets nerfed or it becomes too slow to play. So Charge...
Yeah, that's the list that I think Ray was posting, Blister Guy.
Yeah. That he hit legend with it, and he's just like, this is degenerate and stupid. And it is degenerate and stupid, but it's actually a tier 3 deck. It has a sub 50% win rate because it dies to a Stiff Breeze, it dies to Disruption, it dies to aggro. But if you dirtle at all, you die. If you low roll as an aggro deck, you die. So there's a couple different permutations where it doesn't get there, but it's when it's targeting something, it's really good at getting there. Like, I can't beat it with Odin Warrior. It's unbeatable. There are, when we talk later about like decks that are warping the meta, it's definitely one of the decks that's warping the meta, especially given how popular it was at first, and that seems to be dying down.
What about, so we just talked about some budget decks, some budget friendly decks. What about how often can you take a deck that you're playing now in Standard and say, okay, is there a wild version of this that maybe puts in some wild cards? Like, is that often? Is that rare? Like, because that seems like if I've already playing a deck that I like and I want to play in a wild, if I can just put a couple cards in there and make it wild and do that seems like that'd be pretty budget friendly.
So it's funny. That's something Corbett used to do a lot. Corbett used to watch what the Standard deck builders were doing, the really talented Standard deck builders were doing, and then try to port it over to Wild with a little bit of a Wild twist to it and try to do the same thing. And it's not always 1-to-1. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. And I think the latest version of that happening is Spell Damage Druid. Like, our Spell Damage Druid is a little bit more of a control deck. We have a little bit more armor gain, but it's basically the same suite of cards. It's still making use of the tourist. We're running Rising Waves, we're running Dollhouses, we're running Drinks, but we have access to Street Trickster, which is a 3-mana 0/7 +2 spell damage minion. So sometimes you throw out a Street Trickster and like it's 7 health. They just can't kill it. And if they can't kill it, then you can start drinksing all over them. Now, in my version of the Spell Damage Druid, I also run Concierge and a much forgotten minion of the past from Castle of Nathria called Invitation Courier. Invitation Courier, which you've probably never heard of and never used and never drafted in Arena because, good Lord, why would you? But every time you add a card to your hand from another class, you get a second copy. So imagine that with the drink spell. The third drink gets you 2 second drinks. The second drink gets you 2 final drinks. So you branch it out and add a little bit of spell damage. It is a buttload of damage, and if you play Concierge, it's all free. So I like running that. That's a lot of fun, and that's an example of something that's sort of unique to Wild, but also echoes something you're doing in Standard.
So, yeah, interesting. Like I sit there, I'm like, well, can I play Excavate Paladin? Maybe there's something there and all that. So it's just like, like, can I take the decks that I like and then make it? And I don't need an answer.
When do you want to hit Legend?
Can't
in Wild. Like when is your what time of the month do you want to hit Legend?
I haven't played Wild in about 3 months, so I think my star bonus has gone down. So I haven't really thought about it.
So here's what I'm saying. Are you trying to hit day 1 Legend with Excavate Paladin? Because if you're
Standard?
No, in Wild. If you're trying to hit day 1, like a Wild version of Excavate Paladin, whatever that looks like. I used to have a really good, like, before we got Deputization nerfed, I had a really cool Excavate hand buff Paladin that was actually really good. Like really, really good. And Deputization, it was all built around Deputization Aura. We had like little chargers, like the Stone Tusk boards. You drop them down, they get extra attack from the Deputization Aura, and it was lifesteal. Like, it was just nasty. If you're not trying to enter Legend with the meta players and the meta decks, you can absolutely hit the 30th in the month with Excavate Paladin, some Wild version of Excavate Paladin. You could hit day 10, day 15, day 20. Anything that has some sort of direct game plan and you're an efficient pilot of it can hit Legend in Wild. Are you going to find the odd meta deck that you're just kind of like, I can't beat this. I hate facing charged druids. Sure. But, for the most part, like, when you play Standard, I find when I play Standard, I hit Legend. I queue up a game of Standard ladder after I hit Legend. I'm facing all meta decks. Wild is a lot more chill than that. On my way up to Legend, if I was like to take a more leisurely pace, I'm not going to see a ton of meta decks all the time. Maybe between D5 and Legend, yes. But immediately after hitting Legend, I'm going to start queuing some weird stuff. And sometimes those people queue into you when you're trying to reach Legend. So I think you could absolutely hit Legend with some form of Excavate Paladin. I'll have to look up what Excavate Paladin looks like in Standard, cook a Wild version, and I'll let you know what it looks like. And you could tell me if you can hit Legend with it. It's the 22nd of the month, 8 days or so. You've got the vid, so you maybe have a little bit of time on your hands to give it a shot. We'll see if we can make it happen. I think it's very much possible, and I think people don't realize that it's not all meta decks all the time. In fact, that's one of the reason why, like, it's kind of a joke when Standard streamers would sort of play Wild and be like, Lamau, Wild's so easy. And they have like a negative star bonus and they're playing like chumps playing like Murloc Paladin still. Like, it's like, yeah, you beat up on the guys that aren't playing real decks. Okay, now go get rank 1. And some of them can and some of them do, but some of them like don't bother with the format past that, like, oh, let me hit Legend in Wild with the funny number and then not defend it at the proper MMR. Because, now then it's not easy anymore.
Yeah, I sometimes, I was saying this before the stream, I'd play Wild and then I'd like come back later on and I'd be ready to play Standard and I queue up and I forgot to toggle it back to Wild and I've queued up with a Standard deck and I win.
You can do it.
A lot of times.
I've seen,
probably because my MMR.
I've seen Standard hand buff Paladin in Wild Legend in dumpster ranks. Like, are you going to hit rank 1 with Standard hand buff Paladin? No. Could you play it to Legend? Yeah, sure. Why not? It's got a win condition, which some of the people that I play against in Wild are not doing that. They want to play their like sort of aimless greed Renathal pile, and any Reno deck that has Renathal and the proper Highlander cards is tier 3. So like if you're playing anything fairly direct that's trying to win the game, like you can get there.
All right. Well, it's definitely getting a little late, so I'm gonna pick up the pace a little bit here. So let's say I don't care about being conservative with my dust, and I don't care. I just want to get into Legend, and I want to get to Legend and Wild from wherever I am and play some of the cool and competitive Wild decks. What am I looking at?
Best decks. Best 6 tier 1 decks in Wild right now, as according to Tempo Storm, and I agree with their list. Aggro Priest, Pirate DH, Hostage Mage, which is a deck that uses Romath to repeat Light Show, Solid Alibi, Ice Block, Frost Nova, Potion of Illusion. You see where this is going. Infinite Loop, Infinite Loop, Infinite Loop, Infinite Loop. If you weave in a coin there, we do run Greedy Partner, so we're going to weave in a coin. You can play 8 Romaths in a turn, all ramping up Light Show, freezing your opponent's board, getting Solid Alibi, playing Sleet Skater, getting armor. It's toxic, and it could have been deleted if they had deleted Ice Block instead of Sorcerer's Apprentice, but like, Lamau, Sorcerer's Apprentice is gone. Sure, why not? So Hostage Mage is probably the most expensive deck amongst these. Spell Damage Druid, Miracle Priest, Egg Hunter. You might say, what is Egg Hunter? Well, they buffed the egg for Hunter, and we have Mok'Nathal Lion in our format. And Mok'Nathal Lion copies a Death Rattle. So, like, you run the egg down, and the egg dies, or you trigger the egg's Death Rattle and get a free Mok'Nathal Lion. It's a 5/2 card with Rush that adopts whatever Death Rattle you choose to adopt it with. And so you trade the lion into something on board. The lion dies. It has the egg's Death Rattle. It makes another's free lion. You copy the egg. You trade into something on board. You make another free lion. You see where this is going. You make many free lions, right? And you can do that with Feign Death or Plain Dead or all sorts of ways that we can do that in Wild. And the real kicker and how this finds lethal now is you copy something like Naval Mind or Cobalt Sand Trooper with Bran up. And so you do Bran, we'll say Sand Trooper, Lion on the Sand Trooper, Lion on the Lion, because now it's going to copy the Lion's Death Rattle but double it up because Bran's on board. Then we Lion the Lion, then we Lion the Lion. As famously said in Corbett's Discord, I'm going to need to take this chart and tattoo it on my butt next to the Il'gynoth OTK list. It's you can quickly get over with 6 lions. Like, if you trigger all their Death Rattles at once with Feign Death, it's like 400 damage. Do you need 400 damage? Not often. It's also got a cool sort of scenario where you can have Bran down the mini egg because the mini egg's cheaper. Death Lord, which if you remember Death Lord, when it dies, pulls an opponent's minion from their deck to your board. If you have 2 free lions, you can copy the egg, you can copy the Death Lord. Trade the Death Lord lion into a minion, pop it, draw 2 minions from the deck, send the lion, the egg copied lion into one of the minions, make 2 lions. You have an infinite minion combo. Now it's just a matter of APM. That deck's really cool, and that deck is also tier 1. Piloted best by my good buddy and mod on my channel, Tom Carter. So those are the 6 best decks, and notice that there's some overlap between like the budget decks and the competitive decks. Miracle Priest being like the true middle of the Venn diagram. It's probably one of the cheapest of the tier 1 decks, and also I think it's one of the strongest. It does lose to some stuff, but like pretty flat matchup spread, pretty good into almost anything. Quick games, quick lethals, fun deck.
So right now in standard, Big Spell Mage, we've talked about, right, is kind of like you're either playing it or beating it, or playing something that beats it, or playing something that beats the decks that beat it. Is there a lot of that in Wild where, like, right now, like if I want to climb, I need to either play one of those tier decks or I play like a deck that beats it, or it doesn't really not matter as long as I'm playing a deck that's competitive because it's kind of all over the place?
I think the decks that are the most meta warping right now are Charge Druid and Pirate Demon Hunter. Pirate Demon Hunter is a tier 1 deck. It's meta warping because for an aggro deck, it's kind of mid into aggro. Like it's like 50-50 into every aggro deck. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Pirate Demon Hunter is unfavored into Pirate Rogue, and Pirate Rogue doesn't have Secret Passage anymore. Like it does not like other aggro decks. Are there nutty openers where you just steamroll other aggro decks? Yeah, sure. If you do your Treasure Distributor into 2 Parachute Brigands, into Pulse Patches, into I'm gonna coin Mana Burn, like, okay, yeah, great. Nice job. You won that game. But there's a lot of awkward hands and like 13 copies of patches that it runs, where it actually gives a lot of space for stuff to thrive and exist. But it also, that deck, which makes it unique, is it's much better into slow stuff. It makes lots of small, inconsequential boards that, because of Hosen Roughhouser, South Sea Captain, Field of Strife, Ziliax, these sort of board buff effects can make these sort of low effort, wide, swarmy boards into these sort of deadly pyroblast type events where eventually you run out of stuff to clear them with and you just die. I mean, I tried to play a more traditional Odin Warrior into Pirate DH and found that it was impossible. It was at least a 50-50 proposition because I didn't have enough clears. I had to go to the XL version, which some genius Chinese player created, in order to find that I had finally enough removal and health to sort of get there. So Pirate DH is one of the polarizing factors. You have to be at least able to beat that, which is a stiff hurdle to overcome. The other deck that you have to probably beat is Charge Druid. Charge Druid just sort of ends it immediately if you play anything slow. So what can you do to beat Charge Druid? Well, you can run some Disruption. You can run Far Watch Post. You can run Razor Scale. You can try to rat an important combo piece and then remove it. You can do what Maxi Bond does, which is a little insane, which is run Soul Seeker. You guys probably don't remember Soul Seeker. It's a 5-mana 3/3 that replaces itself with a minion in the opponent's deck. All right, so you could be a lunatic and do that. And there's a chance that like your opponent does the funny combo and then they make a board full of gigantic Soul Seekers, and that gives you a chance to laugh before you die. I'm a little bit not sold on that tech, but like that is a thing that you can do if you're so inclined. You have to find some way to beat Charge Druid, and usually most decks are either trying to beat them in the face so fast they can't do their thing, or if you're some sort of slow, you're doing some sort of disruption to at least make that combo harder. And if you're not doing that, you're at least banking on beating everything else in the meta and just sort of conceding to Charge Druids or Dorian Druids in general. So I'd say those are the 2 decks for me that are warping the format. Some people would say the Demon Seed, which I'm sure you guys hear a lot as standard players, sort of tangentially, like, oh, the Demon Seed, the Demon Seed, the Demon Seed. People complain about the Demon Seed because there is a section of the wild population that wishes they never played against an aggro deck ever. They just want to play their 40-card greed piles. They want to play their Reno, Rainbow, Death Rattle. I don't know how many more adjectives, like Dragon, Death Knight. And they don't want to have any realistic counterplay. And a realistic counterplay to it is the Demon Seed because of its inevitability, and they hate that. And now, is it toxic inevitability? Is it too powerful? I'd be okay with it being nerfed or done away with, but it's not a particularly powerful deck, but it is very powerful at annoying Reddit. So I'd say that also sort of warps the meta because you have to also be able to beat the Demon Seed, but you beat the Demon Seed, they hit themselves in the face. You can hit them in the face. You guys are both working towards the same goal. You can also sort of wait towards a critical moment where they get low enough, and then you just sort of pop them with some sort of hits, or you can even disrupt them. Like, they don't like Far Watch Post. They don't like Nerubian Weblords. You can work in some disruption to your deck. But for the most part, it's a very beatable deck. I don't see it as super meta warping or really meta relevant, but it's going to be a name that you hear about a lot.
I noticed that in all this, you didn't mention, you mentioned it, but not as one of the deck to play was Even Shaman. Has that kind of fallen from grace? Because I remember that was a kind of a...
I'm kind of bullish on Even Shaman. Pirate DH is so, I'm going to say bad into aggro. It's kind of 50-50, but it's so bad into aggro that I wonder, like, Pirate Rogue was really good at sort of like being fast enough, or like through passage scams, or Miracle Rogue too was really good at like beating up on board-based aggro decks with just sort of giant breakdance turns. I think Even Shaman's kind of good right now. Whenever I'm playing off stream, I climb with Even Shaman. Like I'm doing pretty well with it. I've got a decent list, and I think it's not the nuts, but like it beats Charge Druid, it beats Pirate DH, it beats a lot of slow stuff because it does Even Shaman stuff, and like Even Shaman does this very funny thing where it sets its minions' health totals at awkward breakpoints for removals. You have to run very specific removal to take care of 5, 6, 4 health minions. 3s, 2s, we got those a dime a dozen. But 4s and 5s, 5 specifically gets really funky. And if you're not running the right removal for it, it becomes tough to deal with. Now, Miracle Priest eats its lunch. So like if I was going to go to high MMR, I wouldn't play it. But if I was going to play the Legend, Even Shaman's great.
Now, speaking of Even Shaman, and you mentioned the bots before. How have the bots been over the last few months since they've really started?
They've absolutely nuked them. They've nuked them, and I think part of it is there's less of a push now that the Chinese server is going to open up. I believe in 3 days' time. I think it's the 25th is when it's coming back. Wild is going to be a ghost town. I'm going to miss them. For all of the evils that the extra botting and the botting in arena and all that nonsense that the Chinese community brought with them. I mean, I've found them to be very lovely people. I've gotten plenty of friendly ads just sort of saying, hey, hi, love your deck or love your deck list, or hey, just being friendly, just making friends because they don't have any friends on their friends list, and so they want to just have a nice chat. No more. I mean, I've had some toxic ads, but like it's wild. I think it's funny. I'm a little bit of a lunatic. I'll hit up OTZ, who's another wild streamer, be like, hey OTZ, you can read Chinese. What are they saying to me? Are they being friendly? He's like, they are not being friendly. It's like, okay, good. That's even funnier. But no, those are few and far between. I'm gonna miss the creative deck building. They love Wild. They play a lot of Wild, and I think we're gonna see a lot of queue times go up. But the botting, the devs have smashed it. The devs have absolutely smashed it. They've got a good system going where they're picking them up very early. You're going to see some bots at the lower levels where there's fewer player engagement, like actively understanding that they're playing against a bot. Whereas like me, who knows how to see them, I know it's a bot when I see it. So like they're not catching those, but like the higher they get, I've seen maybe one bot this month that I knew for sure was a bot. Playing like a pirate rogue, like playing a classic bot deck and like not conceding at the right spots and very rhythmic. How they were doing everything.
You see that 2-1 Murloc that someone's a 1-1 Murloc, you know you're playing a bot.
Yeah, and I don't see that because I'm not far enough down in MMR where I see that. Like those for a while, those were creeping up the ladder. And now I guess the way...
Because they were playing each other.
Now I guess the way they've formed ladder, now they play each other a lot and sort of tangle up each other the way they've set it up. So like that's good. That's a positive. And I think they've done a good job of that. And also they're squashing them as they come and they're continuing to squash them. But I wonder if the effort to make those bots is reducing with the China server opening up, because they don't need to add value to these new accounts anymore. They can go get their old accounts back. And also Blizzard's kind of hooking them up, saying sorry for locking them for so long, which is the right thing to do and fine. Like I never begrudged anybody botting. I understand. I can emphasize why somebody would bot if my account was locked on me and then I had to start brand new on a new server and I felt like unjustly. Like I get that. I'm not condoning it because I wouldn't bot. But I get why. I can sympathize and say why somebody would.
All right, so let's say I don't care necessarily about winning or losing. I want to win, but I want to play some of the stupid, most degenerate things I can do in Wild. Some things that, like we talked earlier about, like Sunkeeper Raw Rogue and stuff like that. What are a couple like just completely out there, fun, may not win you a lot of games, but when you pull it off, it's going to feel really good decks that you would recommend?
They're like a lot of the glass cannons right now are meta. So like the deck that comes to mind as far as like something stupid and degenerate that you could pull off, I'd play Hostage Mage, honestly. So like you're trying to put together this combo where through the pupils, like the little Tidepool pupils, and through Savara and through Rewinds and through ETC, you're trying to play a potion that didn't start in your deck, a light show that didn't start in your deck, a Solid Alibi or an Ice Block, and also sometimes a Frost Nova. Sometimes Frost Nova creeps in there, and usually a coin. And so you're trying to play those things in your deck, and then you play Rometh, and it just repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. And for me, that's pretty degenerate and goofy and powerful, because there's a lot of decks that just can't deal with it. And what's also fun about that deck is if I'm playing against, like, let's say, Pirate DH, you're freezing their board so many times, but you're still playing out minions. Like, I can beat you with tempo. Like, you just are sitting there not doing anything, and I've board locked you. But I'm hitting you in the face with 3/3s and 2/2s and 4/4s, and it's happening slowly but surely. But like, you're not the beatdown anymore. I'm the beatdown. And watching that realization creep into the wild aggro player's brain, which, let's be honest, it's there's not a ton going on in there. Sometimes it's sort of an echo chamber. I know, like, I have one of the smoothest brains you'll ever see. It's if you could take it out of my skull, it would break land speed records. Like, that's that's always sort of fun to do. As far as like the really, really zany combos, like, that's up there. If you haven't concierge invitation couriered and then played some drinks, try that. That's really funny. Odin Warrior. If you haven't played Odin Warrior yet, if you haven't done a skipper turn that would make the gods cry and whacked your opponent for 100+ damage after gaining all that armor, I would suggest doing that too. So,
with Perils in Paradise, we get Taurus. How impactful has Taurus been in Wild, and how impactful has Perils in Paradise been in Wild?
The Taurus aspect, I called it when the expansion came out. I thought this mechanic was awesome. I thought it was great for casuals, for experimentation. It's been very impactful, I think, but it's been a slow burn. It's taken people a lot of time to figure out how the pieces come together. And I can say this, later about, like, about sets in general, but I'll say it now. I would have somebody come into my Discord, and I know them now because I know they do this, but they basically come in and they sort of test the waters. In different Discords, they say the same thing and they want to gauge the reaction in some things. And so they came in and they said, Perils in Paradise is the second coming of Rastakan's Rumble. And my response was, are you high? Like, the tourist aspect in Wild, especially when you give us that flexibility, it's not even access to all wild cards across a school. That doesn't matter. You give Shaman access to Hunter cards. Now we have, like, a way to tutor, a way to look for and tutor Shudderwalk Shaman. That makes an impact. We now run, if we want to, rogue cards and mage. I don't, but, like, Conman, Ice Block, Conman, Ice Block, a Potion of Illusion, the Conman. Potion of Illusion's a rogue card, so it doesn't repeat the Potion of Illusion, it repeats the Ice Block. You see where this goes. We have some more degeneracy, and we have some more redundancy and some synergies that Standard doesn't have. And especially my beloved Miracle Priest. I was talking with Tito a little bit off the stream about this. There's two versions of Miracle Priest right now. There's basically two schools of thought. The original Miracle Priest was basically built around Radiant Elemental and Creation Protocol. I'll try to be fast. It only runs 3 minions: Radiant Elemental, Handmaiden, and Grave Horror. So Grave Horror is basically a big idiot taunt that gets reduced because of every spell that you play. Maiden, play 3 spells and you draw 3 cards. Like, it's like one of those Naga kind of type cards. And Radiant Elemental reduce all your spell by 1 cost. So as always, find Radiant Elemental, play a bunch of Power Word Shields, play a bunch of Anduin Gifts to Power Word Shields, get your Maiden online, play Funnel Cake for free, make a giant deck of horrors, go face That was the way that you played the deck. People have now figured out that if you use the Priest Tourist, which uses Hunter cards, you're breaking that way that the list was built. The list was built, Creation Protocol, always find 3 minions. Now we can run 2 Creation Protocols and 2 Bird Watchings, but we're running 4 minions. So the calculus has changed a little bit. There's a chance that you whiff. There's a 25% chance that you whiff. But you're now running the Priest Tourist, and you're now running 2 copies of Creation Protocol. Both lists have almost identical win rates. So it's changed the way that you can play Wild. And I personally tried Skyla and Hostage Mage. I didn't like her, but it wouldn't shock me. Like, she's really good in like LPG. She's made LPG Mage relevant because now I can make my LPG Mage cost 0. Let me play LPG on 5, as our god Ben Broden attended in the Boomsday event. You can do that. And so like, yeah, Tourist has definitely influenced Wild, and like new cards almost always influence Wild.
All right, one final question on that. We mentioned how impactful Perils of Paradise cards were, but like, how often do you get a card in a new set that sees 0 play in Standard, but like really makes an impact in Wild? Does that happen?
See Treasure Distributor. Treasure Distributor sees some play, but in Wild it is, to quote one streamer, and this might have to be edited out later. If the devs hadn't smoked a fat blunt and buffed Treasure Distributor, aggro would be dead in Wild. That is a take that you can have, is that without Treasure Distributor, Wild really can't have aggro exist in any real form. Not a hyper aggro really in any real form, because Renathal is so strong and removal is so strong, and stuff like the aggro rogue decks have been nerfed because of Secret Passage. So
do you think it's good that we have that card, or do you think it's bad that we only have that card?
Should Treasure Distributor exist? That is up for debate. I think in a Wild that is a little bit more heavily curated, that sucker gets axed. But yeah, I like, there's other cards I feel like in Standard that have made more, like Egg was making an impact before it made an impact in Standard, like at 5 mana, because it was discounting things by 5. And so we had Princess Huhuran, which is a 5 mana 6/5 that would trigger a death rattle. And so we'd make a big old board of Huhurans, and we'd have some lions in there too. It happens, I'm not going to say like super often, but it happens more often than you'd think, that like something is super bad in Standard and has no chance of getting nerfed, but is doing okay in Wild.
All right, 2 final questions. Is there a viable Rycleaver deck in Wild?
Friends, don't let friends play Big Warrior.
Well, no, it could be Big
Friends
Hunter.
don't let friends play Big Warrior. Don't play the Warrior cards. Warriors set, the strength in Warrior set. I got into this fight with somebody in a Wild Discord, which is a stupid idea, but like, you know, I don't know. I play Wild. Like, they're just like, they're like, man, we haven't had a good Warrior set since Alterac. And I'm like, what do you mean? This set was awesome for Warrior. He's like, no, it wasn't. Have you seen the Warrior cards? I'm like, yeah, you got a Warrior card that tutors 3 minions of different types from your deck, and you got a Warrior card that doesn't let you, that allows you to not play Warrior cards. Like, that's the best buff you could ever get. Like you got a Warrior card that lets you play Druid cards. Have you seen the Druid cards? And like, they kind of like, they backed off after that. But like, that's like, the Tourist definitely made an impact there. Yeah.
So no. Okay. So, do you have any final thoughts for someone who is possibly a Standard player but Wild curious before we wrap this?
It's not as expensive as you think it's going to be. If you're a competent player, you'll probably do very well. You probably have a pretty high win rate. You probably won't see a lot of meta stuff until you're fairly far along in the process, and then you can sort of decide from there whether or not it's for you or not. But like, it's fun right now. It's different. It's very diverse. It's very, very diverse. I think it's probably more diverse than Standard, but I'm not sure because I don't know Standard that well. Just from what I hear tangentially, it's more diverse than Standard. And even somebody like No Hands was saying, like, having played the Brawl, he really liked, like, he was playing like a ping version of Hostage Mage. He's like, like Wild's kind of okay right now. There's very clearly defined aggro control combo decks. They're all represented right now. They're all represented fairly equally, especially across like our proposed tier 1. And it's not that scary because most of it sucks. So there's not a whole lot to learn. So come hang out.
One last, so I know I said that was the final question, but I do have one last question since you kind of went that way. Like in standard, it's really hard to kind of homebrew and find, especially this late in the meta, and find something that might be like something you create and does well or is successful for most people. I mean, there are people that know what they're doing and have the skills. How homebrew friendly is Wild at the moment? Like, can I just make, and I know that's what your stream is developed on. I was going to say, if you want to see someone play your deck before you craft it, send it over to you, go to your stream. You'll probably play it for them and give some suggestions. But how homebrew friendly is Wild to try to do the weird things?
It depends on what you're trying to do. If you have a hyper polarized strategy, if you're trying to grief something, it can be very effective. I always find that the most fun that I have in a lot of these expansions in Wild is late when, like month 2 of the set, month 2 after the mini set, because people kind of like work through the kinks and figure out what can kind of work. And you get to see some weird stuff that fills some funny niches in the meta. And so you'll find some homebrew that does work, but it takes time and it takes effort and it takes cooking. So like, it's not great if you're like, well, I'm just going to make this thing and this thing will work. Well, no, that's going to take a little bit more trial error than that. But like, I do see it. And I think the later the expansion goes, the more friendly it gets, especially if you're familiar with the meta.
How often do you play a card and someone's hovering over it and reading what the heck it does?
Ooh, not super often where I'm at. I've been like solidly mid legend for a while, but like you see that a lot when like I got early access to Egg Hunter because one of the top guys playing it is a mod on my channel. And I did an interview with him and we talked through like where he made his card choices and whatnot. And like like the amount of times I saw people like hovering over Machnathal Lion and being like, what is happening? And then getting ads and then being like, can I have your deck code? And it's like, yes, you can have my deck code. Check it out. That does happen, but not as much as you expect, because again, a lot of the cards suck. So it's a kind of a limited pool.
All right, Doc. Well, that was a lot of information. I'm getting full, and I'm hoping we can wrap this up in 2 hours. What do you think?
Yeah, this dessert sounds good to me too, Tito. So Schmoopy, we do have one final interview question for you, and that is, what is your favorite dessert?
French vanilla ice cream.
Nice.
Solid.
It is a classic. Listeners, please leave us a review. We prefer 5 stars, but because it helps with visibility, but honestly, give us what you feel like we deserve. Let us know the good, bad. Let us know the good, bad, the ugly, because we want this show to be the best it can be for us, but also the best it can be for you. If you leave us a review or email us, we'll read it out on the show. Schmoopy, where can people find you on social media?
Sure. I am Schmoopydady HS on YouTube, and let me check Twitter real quick. Hi, future Tito.
You might want to spell that whole thing.
Okay, sure. So, all right, it's a little confusing across different platforms, okay? So, Schmoopydady on Twitter is SCHMOO Pi DADDYHS on Twitter. On YouTube, I am SHMOOPYDADYHS on YouTube. And on Twitch, I can't remember. It's one of those.
Thank you, Speak and Spell. Doc, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Doc McButt. Tito, how about yourself?
Find me Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok on Tito Santana HS. And if I'm not somewhere where you think I should be, let me know. You got any shout outs this week there, Schmoopy?
Sure. Shout out to Wild Players for, throwing rocks at hornets' nests.
Absolutely.
How about yourself, Doc?
Just big thank you to Schmoopy for coming on. It was really fun to get to talk Wild, and I may or may not have built Egg Hunter already.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to trying to learn that. Yeah. How about yourself, Tito?
I'm gonna shout out to Pilot and Dr. Bomb, Dr. Bomb MD, who are both on my Dr. Bomb is They're both playing each other in the Coin Can See Listener Series finale. Me and World 8 are going to be casting that tomorrow night, which you will not know about because this will not come out until Wednesday. But looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And definitely thanks, Schmoopydady. If you ever want to maybe do a co-op stream, you can come on my stream. We'll do a little wild. I think that could be a lot of fun.
Sure.
But anyway, guys, I think that's it. I think we're toast. We'll see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Slide two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.